Hello and welcome to the Stormont Sources podcast, where we take you inside politics at Stormont and inside policymaking for Northern Ireland. I'm David McCann, and also on the podcast is Tim Cairns, former Special Advisor to First Minister Peter Robinson. Hello, Tim.
Hello, David, and hello, Michael.
And we also have Michael McKernan, former Special Advisor to the SDLP. Michael, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, David, and hello, Timothy Kearns.
A full name
Pleased to be
well.
here, Michael McKernan.
All right. On the podcast today, the latest on the Irish presidential election. Nominations have now closed for the Irish presidential election, so the race is formally underway. Sinn Féin have joined with other left-wing parties to back Catherine Connolly. We're going to be asking, is that the right move for the party? Also today, the DUP conference was last week. We'll look at Gavin Robinson's vision for unionism and consider whether there's a contradiction in what he's proposing. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please press subscribe at the top of your feed on whatever app you're using, and you'll get our episodes every week. On to the first topic. Nominations have closed for the Irish presidential election. 3 candidates are in the race to succeed Michael D. Higgins. They are Catherine Connolly as the United Left candidate, Heather Humphreys for Fine Gael, and Jim Gavin for Fianna Fáil. On Saturday, Sinn Féin made the decision not to run a candidate and back Catherine Connolly, joining other left-wing parties. For months, we've been speculating on whether Sinn Féin should run, whether that is the right move, and now they're backing Catherine Connolly. Michael, was this a surprise?
Not a surprise at all. It was flagged by the venerable Jim McVeigh of Sinn Féin for some weeks. He was exhorting some of his colleagues to back Catherine Connolly, so he must have had the inside track on the leadership.
Jim McVeigh, by the way, is a former Sinn Féin Belfast City Councillor, by the way.
Much more. But anyhow, so it was trailed. We did have an amusing little vignette from Francie Malloy, who thought that Sinn Féin could throw its weight in behind the Fine Gael candidate. But it's not surprising. Sinn Féin are very edgy after their disappointing results in general elections down south. They don't really want to lose another one. They don't want to put up a candidate that mightn't do very well. And they had no obvious candidate other than Mary Lou, their leader. So they threw their lot in with, a perfectly respectable candidate backed by the Labour Party, backed by the Social Democrats, backed by People Before Profit, a left of centre, bright, experienced, independent politician. But the beauty of it from the Sinn Féin point of view is that if she wins, they can claim the glory. They can say it was their national machine that got the vote out for her and so on. If she loses or does badly, they can say, well, it was just a bit of a mishmash. It was all down to herself and she was a bit of an ideologue anyway. So they win either way.
Now, Catherine Connolly, for anyone who doesn't know, she's an independent TD, so she's not with any party, but she did cause some news this week. She was on Talkback with William Crawley on Monday, and she made some comments about Hamas and about whether it should be up to the British government to dictate whether Hamas can be part of a future Palestinian state. The Taoiseach commented on this, criticising her comments, and again, it made big news. Tim, Catherine Connolly, what do you make of her in light of what I've just said?
Well, I listened to the Talkback interview with her, and I thought she was deeply unimpressive in it. Look, I have to confess, I don't know a lot about any of the candidates. Just, really, if I wasn't doing this podcast, I don't think I would pay it any attention. But because we're talking about it, I have paid a reason more attention than I've paid in the past.
This is your head of state, Timothy.
No, my head of state's King Charles III. But she just came across as pretty unimpressive. I thought William really led her down a path and really led a few bombs for her. And for someone who's supposedly an experienced barrister, an experienced politician, she stepped in the landmines and caused herself, I think, some damage. I mean, what she said was pretty shocking and surprising. She was saying basically that Hamas are part of the Palestinian landscape, and if the people want Hamas, a terrorist organization, then the people should have Hamas. And I thought, would you seriously say that, the IRA are just part of the political landscape in Northern Ireland, and if the people want the IRA, the people have the IRA, or UVF or UFF or whatever the prescribed organisation is? It seemed like a really dim-witted thing to say for someone who's supposedly an experienced politician. And I think the backlash is to be understandable because Hamas obviously are a prescribed organisation, like the prescribed organisations in Northern Ireland. And I thought for someone so experienced, it showed me she was exceptionally politically naive.
I think that's definitely her Achilles heel. She is an ideologue. She has strong principles and very strong beliefs. She reminds me slightly of Jeremy Corbyn, that he can't bring himself to be flexible or even to ever say sorry or to ever say he was wrong. He cannot conceal his opinions, even when it's massively sensible to conceal them. And I think that could be her own doing in this campaign, because she'd be probed about her beliefs about everything, and some of them mightn't air well in public.
It's interesting you say the Jeremy Corbyn thing, Michael, because that was what was in my head listening to the interview. Jeremy Corbyn, that comparison between the two of them, of making kind of clumsy statements and statements that otherwise you just would never make. Like if you had a decent communications advisor,
but also unable to smoozle out of them like a good politician should.
But I think it seemed to me that the interview was going down a path, and there was she didn't even put up any guardrails for herself. I mean, William just drew her down this path, put her in front of a landmine and said, "Are you going to step in this landmine?" And she did. I mean, it just felt to me for someone who's supposedly running for this high office, just so incredibly naive that she would make the comments that she made.
I mean, I suppose it is interesting because she has put together quite a powerful coalition behind her. All the main left-wing parties, so from Sinn Féin to Labour, the Social Democrats, the Green Party, People for Profit, they are all backing Catherine Connolly. You know, for an independent TD, that's not bad going. So she must have some sorts of networking skills that she's able to do that. But Michael, just to go back to our earlier topic, on Sinn Féin standing aside, because we had a number of candidates. Mary Lou was talked about, Michelle was talked about, Pierce Doherty was talked about as well. I mean, obviously Sinn Féin ran in 2018 and bombed in the campaign. It was a disaster for them with Leah Narita. Do you think that the party was just once bitten, twice shy on this, or is there a wider strategic creating an alternative left-wing government dynamic going on here?
No, I think it's just once bitten, twice shy. I don't think they want to run a candidate, particularly their leader or even their leader in the north, and not win. If they thought they would have won, if they thought they could have won, I think they would have run. But they've made that decision. And Catherine Connolly came along quite conveniently because she already had the backing. The numbers, I mean, it's quite restrictive to get into this race. It's a real pity that it's three. There were two others knocking on the door who would have enriched the competition. But no, Labour, Social Democrats and all were behind them. And Sinn Féin, of course, made great store after the general election of having a government of the left, if all the left-leaning parties all amalgamated together, along with independents and People for Profit and so on. So it fits with that narrative, but the real reason is they don't want to get beaten. They want to be winners, and their focus will be on the next general election.
It feels to me like this is going to be a very dull election, with no independents in the race. I mean, we've seen just in the last 24 hours that some independents came up close to the 20 signatures needed and just fell short. And I think the election is going to be the poorer for that. Because if you think, Sean Gallagher and what do you call the other dragon who ran?
The guy, he came second last time.
He said the stuff about the Travellers. What was his name?
Yes.
Well, he came a surprise second. Like, he actually did
So he made some
well.
comments about the travelling community, and that just took him from nowhere to rocketing up the polls. And there's going to be none of that in this election. There's going to be no, like, because Sean Gallagher, he came unstuck. He was riding high in the polls and then came unstuck because he hemmed and hawed and debates over his links to Fianna Fáil, and there's the finance scandals and all of that were going on at the time, and what was his background in that, and he went from the top of the polls to falling down because he couldn't handle that in the debates. And so there's going to be none of that this time. We've got three politicians who are seasoned campaigners within the Dáil. We're just going to see very boring debates, and
I'm not so sure. This election, once the race starts, there'll be incredible media focus and people feeding the media with little bits of alleged dirt or scandal about any of the candidates, and they're not all squeaky
They
clean.
are.
I have a question for you, Michael. Actually, it's something I saw on Twitter, and I know nothing about this, so I ask you this question. Somebody said that they noticed that there was no players from the Dublin 5 in a row who had come out to back Jim Gavin. Has he some history of being a tyrant as a coach or something?
Well,
like that? I don't know. So.
Well, that's interesting. But now you mention it, I'm sure some of them will emerge from the woodwork. But that is his problem, I think, in this election. He's obviously a GAA legend and a Dublin GAA legend. But will his appeal? He strikes me as kind of fairly straight-laced guy. Although I'm assured by the Lurgan Thursday night focus group that I attend, that he's going to walk it. But I don't think his appeal will be huge beyond the GAA or beyond Dublin. So we'll see. But they say he has other qualities. Obviously, he's got a quality of leadership, but he has other qualities when people get to know him better in the political arena.
And in terms of actually, so Tim was saying about only 3 candidates running, first time since 1990. That was the case, although that was actually a fascinating presidential. That was the one where Mary Robinson became president, and Austin Curry, he had to bring up bad memories for Michael, former SDLP minister, ran for Fine Gael and came a poor third.
And Mary Robinson was a barrister who was an independent on the left.
She was backed by the Labour Party. And again, the reason why for our international listeners that is significant, because she was seen as the sign of a new modern liberal Ireland coming with her politics as well.
And she had absolutely no baggage like Hamas or anything like that, no Corbynista baggage.
No, there was not. She was quite mainstream. In terms of, Tim, the Irish presidential election, the cut through in the north. I mean, are they talking about this in the Welders Club and on the Ards Road or in the Con Club? What's the local DUP branch thoughts on this race?
Well, I don't think. I mean, as I say, like if I wasn't in this podcast, I would pay very little attention at all. I mean, I've only been reading around it and reading articles and reading newspapers only because I know you two want to bore people with it. So I think the only thing that's probably cut through with the Unionist community is the whole Heather Humphreys stuff. And I think there has been real cut through on that because I think people have been arrested by, I mean, just to give a bit of background, she's a Protestant, she's from Cavan, her husband was in the Orange Order. She's attended Orange Order parades, and this became a big issue, a week or two ago. When did her husband leave the Orange Order? When did she last go to a parade? And I think for Unionists, it's been, I've sat up and taken notice and said, look, we're told there's going to be this new Ireland. We're told the Orange Order are going to be part of this new Ireland. Well, you can't even tolerate someone whose husband might have worn a collar once to be president of your country. My goodness. You people should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself, David. Ashamed of yourself.
Tim, I don't know if the anesthesia is still hanging over you as a result of the operation last week. But look, can we just say one newspaper, one journalist asked a question? That is all that's happened.
No,
she is still leading in the polls. I would just have you know, Tim. So there goes your party election broadcast.
That has been a huge misrepresentation. That was a storm in the teacup. Shock horror. A Protestant might have a connection with the Orange Order. I mean, daft. I think the fact that there's Orange Order connections makes her even more authentically Protestant and therefore more attractive to modern liberal Ireland as a presidential candidate. And the DUP went off and won, and Gavin went off and won in his speech as though this is the real view of Ireland. They hate Protestants or whatever. Just bunk them. Heather Humphreys' popularity has been high for years. And
that's what we're hearing. I'll stick my neck
out here. She's going to win.
I think she's going to win too. I agree with Michael.
So what was that? So what was that 3-minute monologue about then? You've just said she's going to win.
But I think she's going to win. But I do think bubbling in the underneath.
So what you just said there was wrong, by the way.
Bubbling underneath, we saw the mask slip of some of the new Ireland people, that there will be a place for the Orange Order, there will be a place for Unionists. There just won't. And I think let's see how this plays out over the next couple of weeks. Let's see how this plays out in the debates. Let's see how this plays out whenever she's challenging this on TV, and let's see what the reaction is to it, because clearly You know, she's been in interviews on RTE where she's got a pretty tough ride over attending a picnic that the Orange Order put on in Cavan. There is nothing more benign than a Cavan Orange Order picnic. But yet, for some, that's too much.
No, that's nonsense. That won't cost her at all. What will cost her is they'll dig into some of the things she did many years in government in different departments, and they'll find some piece of rubbish that she didn't do right when she was in government, and they'll blow that up and amplify it and throw it at her. The orange thing is a bonus.
Yeah, well, of course, Heather Humphreys, I think, was the minister in charge of the whole... Do you remember at the start of 2020? This, believe it or not, was what we argued about. In January of 2020 was the RIC commemoration thing. That's what dominated the headlines here on the first week of 2020. 6 weeks later, jeepers, where did that year go? But in terms of the Heather Humphreys saga with the Orange Order, was she in there? Was she not? Michael, do you think that, you know, going to what Tim is saying, I mean, she got an odd endorsement from Francie Malloy, who's a former Sinn Féin MP for Mid-Ulster, who was arguing that for a New Ireland, it would be may not be the worst thing in the world to have Heather Humphreys present.
My Thursday night focus group includes a couple of Sinn Féin supporters, and they would echo Francie Malloy's sentiments. I think she'd be a great candidate. Incidentally, you should mention the fact she had ruled herself out of the contest, but only went in when the Fine Gael favourite Mairead McGuinness pulled out on health grounds, and of course we wish her well, Mairead, full recovery. But I think Heather Humphreys has nothing to fear from Nationalist Ireland when it comes to this election.
Well, we should also point out, by the way, whilst Heather Humphreys, yes, her husband, yes, her grandfather did sign the Ulster Covenant, she herself is a declared supporter of Irish unity, just for clarity. So it is a sign, and Tim may not like this, that actually people from those traditions have gone on to thrive, and even Northerners who went down, like people like Drew Harris, who became the Garda Commissioner, who was the former...
Everybody that, you know, attacked him, picked.
Every Garda Commissioner gets attacked, him though, but he thrived. But he did.
He didn't thrive.
He's the longest serving Garda Commissioner in over a decade. Tim. He was he actually completed his term, so he got an extension of his term. So you know.
Well, something I was going to ask you, do you have because I think in a previous podcast you had said the person who's leading in September never wins. Heather Humphreys is leading. Is she not going to win?
I don't. Who knows? Trends are there to be broken, but that is typically the rule of thumb. No one ever remembers Eddie Roach. Eddie Roach was leading in '97 over Mary McAleese. She was seen as the inheritor to Mary Robinson. Brian Lenihan was leading in 1990 over Mary Robinson. He went on to lose. I don't know. It's a three-corner contest, so it'll be interesting. If Jim Gavin is third, you've got to think that his preferences would elect Heather Humphreys, and vice versa. So that's going to be Catherine Connolly's problem. She could lead on first preferences, as Brian Lenihan did in 1990, and when Austin Curry got eliminated, that put in Mary Robinson. So that's going to be Catherine Connolly's problem. How does she get to a majority? So it's an STV election. How does she get to the quota? That's going to be
her problem will also be not walking on any more of Tim's landmines, because she'll be asked about something controversial and she'll just straight off the bat say what she really thinks. And this job does not require somebody to articulate all these fairly hardline views on a whole range of issues. The President makes the occasional political intervention, but it's usually very measured, and it's usually with the national conscience in mind. Higgins said some things about Gaza, which probably was in tune with public opinion. And the only thing he ever did really hear that might have been controversial would have been when he simply said, when there was a big celebration up in Armagh with archbishops involved and so on, that he did not want to celebrate the partition of Ireland when the anniversary of partition came up. And that would have been in tune probably with the thinking of most of the people in the country anyway. But Catherine Connolly is capable of giving a big, strong opinion on almost anything.
Yeah,
numbers signal the Unionists that there's no place for them in a new Ireland. But thanks for reminding me of that, Michael.
That's a,
no. Why would a president of Ireland
partition?
ever celebrate?
You don't have to celebrate, but you can at least say that you acknowledge in a religious service that it happened.
There was loads of acknowledgement, Tim.
If you can't even go up to Northern Ireland to sit in a religious service run by the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church,
celebrating partition,
and say a fact happened.
Celebrating
What kind of what kind of political small man
How
are
can
you?
how can the
Literally
president,
and
how can the
figuratively.
president of any country celebrate the worst thing
Let me
that ever
tell you,
happened to his country?
Mary Robinson would have gone. Mary McAleese would have gone. Anybody worth their salt
Really,
would have
I
gone.
thought all because I thought Unionists had a problem with Mary. I love how Unionists tend to like the presidents once they leave office. I thought Mary
So-
McAleese was someone that Unionists didn't like actually, and when she was in the post. But that's by the by. You'll like Michael D. Higgins in a few months, Tim. Don't worry about it. You'll get over it. They're always great once
Well,
they leave
I
office.
like the Saw Doctors song anyway about him.
Right. Okay. Presidential race. So it doesn't happen until October. So there's still a long ways to go. Timothy, do you want to take a punt as to who would you like to win? Who would you like to see getting sworn in Dublin Castle as just and I mean that in a serious sense. Just who do you
That's
think
a
would probably be the
matter of
best?
great indifference to me, but if I had a vote and I was going to vote, I would vote for the Fine Gael candidate, Heather Humphreys. One, and I would not transfer to anybody else.
What a
So-
waste of a vote in an
so
STD
that's-
system. Never
so-
do that.
So
Go
just
ahead.
a tribal sectarian vote. I would vote for her too, and I would hope that she would win.
Okay, Heather Humphreys, brilliant. Okay, well there we
And
go.
that'll warm your wee Fine Gael heart, so we'll do it.
So well, Michael's the one more in the blue shirt.
Wait a minute,
here,
wait a minute. I'm supposed to be a strong nationalist here.
so Michael's the.
What
Michael's
am I
the one.
saying?
You will be paying attention to what is going on in that campaign between now and the end of October. More to come from Tim and Michael. We'll look at the outcome of the DUP conference in a few minutes. Remember, if you'd like to watch the podcast, head to YouTube and search for Stormont Sources. Press subscribe to the channel. You'll get our latest episodes, watch our clips, leave your comments on X and TikTok, and be the first to hear about upcoming events and special episodes. Subscribe to our mailing list at stormontsources.com. This is Stormont Sources podcast. Let's talk now about the DUP party conference in Belfast last weekend. This was Gavin Robinson's second conference as leader, and the party has well and truly begun setting out their stall for the 2027 Assembly elections. They were critical of the TUV, Irish Government and Sinn Féin, and there was an interesting pitch for unionist cooperation and unity. Interesting messaging from the DUP this weekend that it's either Starmer or Stormont, and again that is seen as a direct attack on the TUV. So the TUV would happily bring down Stormont tomorrow, yet Gavin Robinson seems to be saying on another hand that he would be happy to work with them. Tim, there is surely a fundamental contradiction in Gavin Robinson's approach, no?
Well, I think first off, I mean, we need to congratulate ourselves because we called the messaging right. We said last week there needs to be three things. There needs to be dealing with something in and around the protocol and some kind of acknowledgement of what's gone wrong. There needs to be a focus on the DUP can deliver. And I was really taken with Paul Given's speech actually, because he said exactly, we said last week, I would put Paul Given front and centre to show how a minister delivers and gets round Sinn Féin. That's exactly what his speech was. And then the third leg that we said was they need to do something about the TUV, and then we had the Starmer or Stormont line. So that's the three things we said should be the messaging. That was the three things that were the messaging. You know, I think it was, you know, in that sense, the DUP got it right. If we're right, of course. And I actually thought, you know, the conference went pretty well. I really like the Starmer Stormont line, and it gives a choice. And I really like this idea of putting it up to the TUV. And I think that they need to do this a bit more with the TUV because Jim Allister was on with Philip Brett on Monday, and I thought Philip let him off the hook a wee bit because here's the thing for Jim Allister. Jim, we bring down the executive, we bring down Stormont. What next? What next? When we know what you know, history tells us that the civil servants run Stormont for a while, and then the government threatens joint authority, and then unionists come back. So what's your plan? How is bringing down the executive going to bring what you want when history tells us that's not going to happen? So the DUP are absolutely right. It's Stormont or Starmer. Starmer, perhaps with a little bit of greening from down south, whether it be some sort of consultative role for the government in Dublin. That's what's going to happen. Now, is that better than Stormont? And I think, you know, Jim Allister needs to answer that. And the DUP really need to force him to answer that, because I think they're still letting him off the hook a little bit by not saying, Jim, what next? You bought down Stormont. What's going to happen after that? And then I think, you know, for the DUP, this idea of showing that the DUP can deliver in challenging circumstances, I think that's the right way to go. That's the right way to show the DUP are the party that knows how to navigate round Stormont, knows how to navigate round the legislation and bring delivery. So I think they're on the right lines. I do still think they're probably going to need to go a little bit further on being honest about the protocol and what happened. But I think they can tie that in with this idea of we need to have Stormont, we need to have delivery, and we can't just hand things over to Keir Starmer as the TUV would want.
Okay, Michael, were you paying attention to the DUP this weekend?
It's not my normal choice of viewing on a Saturday afternoon, but yes, I watched the speech. I thought the first thing that struck me was he's clearly in control of the party. The party's united behind him, and that says something given the choppy times when he took over the leadership. I agree with Tim. The strongest part of his speech was the challenge he posed to the TUV, because if you bring down the Assembly, what are you going to get? You're going to get legislation from London. And the last time the DUP kind of, got balchy on a topic such as, for example, abortion, and wouldn't legislate here, they ended up getting it from the Labour Party, and they got the worst package probably imaginable from their point of view. And on other issues, then I don't agree with his position on this, but on other issues like the trans rights and assisted dying and things like that, would you rather have, if you're a unionist and conservative, would you rather have the DUP or would you rather have the British Labour Party in London? And I think TUV don't have an answer for that. So it's quite a strong proposition. I thought the rest of the speech, it obviously had the usual knockabout. And it wouldn't be a complete DUP speech without slashing into Dublin and into the Dublin government and giving nationalists generally a bit of a pacing. One area that I thought was curious, in part of his taking apart the Dublin government and trying to imply that they were close to Hamas and all of that, he used the words, and they've no right to criticise. What he said was Israel's just war in Gaza. And that didn't get a round of applause. That struck me as odd, that it was a silent room that greeted that remark. And I think the DUP might be just a wee bit too pro-Israel for their own good, if that's what Gavin is reflecting, because nobody could really consider what's going on in Gaza. A reasonable person, even a Christian, couldn't watch that and think it's okay. Yes, the Israelis have the right to defend themselves. Yes, that Hamas atrocity almost 2 years ago now, horrible that it was, can't justify the absolute battering that's going on in Gaza. And I thought Gavin, I thought he got that one wrong. And then I think, like Tim did earlier, I think he got the Heather Humphreys thing wrong. But all in all, a competent speech, and he's given the TUV something to think about.
I thought it was actually interesting, Tim, the amount of attention Gavin directed toward the Irish government. We haven't that actually has died off from DUP leaders actually over the last number of years. Now it did pick up a wee bit during the Brexit years, but it had been something that the DUP had gradually moved away from. But Gavin seemed to go back to it. Now, granted, the legacy proposals and all last week, but still, it's a bit pointed.
Well, I think that's the background. I mean, if those legacy proposals hadn't have been in his mind on Tuesday, Wednesday last week, I don't think there would have been that focus. I mean, coming back to what you said in your intro question, I do think the one problem that they have unresolved, notwithstanding, I do think they need to go a wee bit further in the protocol, but the one problem they've got is they've got this dual messaging of unionist cooperation with the TUV can't deliver for you. And there's a strange juxtaposition of those two messages that both can't be true. You can't have full unionist cooperation and the TUV be not the best thing for unionism. So I think that's going to have to be finessed in some way, because I don't see in any way, shape or form the TUV cooperating with the DUP at the next election. When if the TUV put up a candidate in East Belfast at the last general election, say we don't care if Gavin Robinson wins or loses, well, they're not going to cooperate with you in 2027.
Yeah, well, but this sort of drives me crazy. It's an STV election. You just need to transfer. You don't need to do.
But I do still think that they need to lay down a ground for what's going to happen in the next general election, because clearly unionists do.
General election's different, but in an STV election.
But I think I would almost drop that sort of cooperation messaging as front and centre in the run up to 2027. I worry about cooperation post 2027.
The one thing, and I was up there, the one thing that was hanging over the conference was the Jim Allister shaped elephant in the room. if the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about, Jim hasn't got much to worry about, and that's because Jim Allister knows, the TV know this. Their way to more assembly seats runs through the DUP. They're not going to take seats from Sinn Féin or the SDLP. They're going to take them from the DUP, and that's where I think Gavin is. I just didn't totally understand that.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you have to have this Starmer Stormont line. I think that's the one they need to hammer.
Yeah.
Up to
I thought he did
2027.
okay as well on the protocol. You know, he started the speech
He did,
highlighting the question of trust and admitting that some people had lost trust or lost faith in the party and the party needed to win it back and so on. The other bit that I thought was poor, and I was looking for wee vision with a small v even for the future, not just unions cooperation. And I was looking for something, because I asked him when we had him on the pod, have you anything that gets the DUP away from this rebels and renegades and crocodiles and just slapping nationalism about the place, where you might actually set out some strategy for winning people who are reasonably open-minded to actually come over onto the side of the union in the years ahead? And there's nothing there.
And I don't know that the party conference is about that, but Michael,
No,
I mean,
maybe
I think,
not. Yeah.
you know, I think that's something that Gavin needs to start setting out a stall. And I think in his interviews that he did subsequently, both on Sunday Politics and then on Talkback, you know, I think you saw, you know, Gavin at his best in both those interviews. I thought he dealt the Sunday Politics interview. I thought was really a masterclass in how you do a political interview.
Let me go on, because obviously Gavin coming out of the traps. You're kind of defending a record here and defending kind of the DUP's approach in government. I want to talk a wee bit about those interviews, because obviously he got a bit combative with Mark. He didn't have a great general election interview with Mark. Actually, he was under pressure, and he looked under pressure as well. But this time he seemed a bit more confident. And I think, just going back to something Michael said, there is clear warmth to Gavin amongst the DUP party faithful. Normally at DUP, even under Peter Robinson, there was always, I mean, this time 10 years ago, Peter Robinson was about to depart the stage. And I remember at that conference, Tim, and you would have been working at it, the relief that Peter was going, because everyone knew he was going to go, and the relief that he was going. And people thought at that time Nigel was about to become the party leader.
They shouldn't have bet on it.
Yeah, well, people thought then. But with Gavin, normally there's always a wee bit
I bet on both outcomes, Michael.
normally there was a wee bit of briefing at every party conference. There's always a bit of unhappiness with the leadership team. But you know what? There was none, even in private conversations, there was none about Gavin. They accept that he has stabilised the party.
He's at the height of his power, yeah.
But back to what Michael was saying, though, I mean, I'm still none the wiser. 2 speeches in, I'm still none the wiser as to what he's about. What's the Robinson version of the...
But they said that in our podcast. I mean, he said up until sort of this autumn, it's all been internally focused. And he said, you know, he said this in the interviews that he's done since, that, and he said this back in June to us. So it's been internally focused. So you're not going to see those roots that have been planted, and now it's going to be outward focused from here. So I think, you know, we've got to judge him on what his philosophy is going to be from here on in, because he's been very clear that post this conference, it's going to be the outward focus in the campaign. And I think we saw that start on Sunday Politics. He was clearly very confident. He was clearly very composed. Clearly, that was a very good interview. That's one of the best interviews I've seen with Mark Carruthers for quite some time. He really did. He really looked. He wasn't thrown. He wasn't shaken, and he put it back to both Mark and to William and Talkback as well. I thought they were very good all round performances.
One of the interesting things that jumped out at me was obviously Paul Given had a prominent spot, but then obviously being doorstepped by the Burkes, the Burke family who doorstepped Paul Given.
That's something we called wrong after congratulating ourselves. We clearly got that wrong, because we were saying a few weeks ago the Burkes would be happy with Paul Given. And you know, shocker of all shockers. You can't satisfy the Burkes.
But you know what though? But Paul, I thought, handled that really well. Actually being doorstepped, he actually handled it incredibly well. But that's not. I don't want to get into the Burkes. And then Gordon Lyons, obviously. But the one person who I thought played a very small role was Emma Pengelly. She did not play a big... Jonathan Buckley had a bigger role at the conference there. Jonathan Buckley gave the obviously the rabble-rousing speech about immigration and focused on DUP bread and butter. Even Sammy Wilson made a prominent return, chairing a panel on the future of the union. But Emma just didn't really feature. What's going on there? Why do we think that? Are we overthinking that?
I think you're overthinking that, David. I mean, she did. I wasn't at the conference, you were, but I'm right in saying she did the speech before Gavin.
She did, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, look, that's the second most prominent position. That's the old Nigel Dodd slot from back in the Peter Robinson days. You know, I think what you're confusing is her not having a prominent position with her speech not getting coverage. And maybe I think actually for Emma that's a good thing, because if she's out there dropping bombs, it makes it a lot more difficult for her to go back into Stormont Castle. It's better Johnny Buckley's the attack dog, or Paul Given's the attack dog. I think in her position she probably needs to be a little more statesperson-like, and I think that's what she was, and she's playing a slightly different role.
And
she was talking about delivery, and that was a key theme for the party.
Another return, by the way. The flags were back. The flags came back. The Union flags that we said should never have went. They're back.
The only other thing that needs to come back and wasn't back is Willie McRae singing "There'll Always Be an Ulster." Taking that away was an absolute travesty.
He shouldn't sing something that's untrue.
Well, there will always be an Ulster, Michael.
Even
if you're an Irish nationalist, there'll be an Ulster.
Not his Ulster.
So
reuniting it with the other three.
There'll always be an Ulster under King Charles and his successors.
Anyway, just in terms then of where this goes. So the DUP again, good vibe, buoyant. We're not expecting this to feed through to the polls, because only nerds like us pay attention to party conferences. I mean, it gets the party some decent coverage, but that's about it. Michael, in terms of what does Gavin need to do next? So he's had a decent conference. He's 18 months in now. What does he need to do next, do you think, to really step or build on that progress and step it up?
Well, first of all, we are heading into the next election. And so Gavin just needs to put the DUP into that robust place where he's put them. Forgive us for our little difficulties over the protocol. We haven't given up on it. We're still going to work on it. But forgive us for maybe losing some trust. But what about this guy over here, this TUV guy who wants to undo all the progress that we have made, and you can't elect them. I think he would be focusing on them. Tim's line, Stormont or Starmer, is a good one, and I think that's what he's going to be focused on for the next year. After that, he still has to come back to the thing that I'm rattling on about, which is how you can unite unionism all you like, and it's probably impossible to do it. But how can you bring more people into the union fold? People who aren't maybe strident politically about anything, but how can you get them just to decide that they're unionists after all? I'm looking for a strategy. This is a young leader. He's got 10 years ahead of him to have a real go at this. Can he get people who are, for want of a better term, Catholics, to support the union?
Okay. Tim, what do you think he needs to do?
Well, we need to see his philosophy emerging, and that's what he says he's going to do. I think Michael's right. I mean, I think he needs to be a confident leader who's setting a 10-year philosophy and strategy. He's easily saying this is for the long haul, and this is how we're going to, win votes back for the union, and this is the plan, and this is the roadmap to do it. And I think he needs to do that in positive terms rather than negative terms. I think he needs to set out what is a positive vision for the future, and I think, I look forward to seeing what that is, because he said from here into the election, that's the vision he's going to set out. So let's see what it is. And I think he's at the height of his powers right now. And I think, we've got to look back to where Arlene Foster was. She was at the height of her powers, following the 2016 election, and then almost immediately that evaporated when she started to try and set out long-term vision, and she started to get herself muddled up, and started to get started to have misstep after misstep. I don't think Gavin's going to do that. Gavin is a completely different leader. I think he's not someone who sort of lets that height of his power go to his head. He's a very grounded individual and a very grounded human being, and he's just a blooming nice bloke, and I think that's going to start to come through.
Okay, and obviously the interesting thing is he didn't really reference a border poll in his speech. The way the talk is, we need to stop the shinners because there'll be a border poll, and that was actually absent.
I don't think that's not going to be the strategy in this election. It's not going to be boogaloo Sinn Féin's coming for you.
It didn't work in 2022, so
that's not going to be the strategy. Yeah. Well, if that's going to be the strategy, it's a mistake, but I'm 100% confident that's not going to be the strategy this time.
All right, okay. Well, look, more party conferences are to come. The SDLP are meeting next week, and then the Ulster Unionists are meeting the week after that as well. So we'll be talking, dissecting the challenges and opportunities for those parties as well. Gents, thanks very much for going through all that with me. Thanks to all of you for joining us at Stormont Sources. Drop us a WhatsApp with your questions or comments, 0333 404 6507. Remember to use the word Stormont so we know it's for this podcast. Also send us an email, hello@stormontsources.com. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.